Good morning, everybody, and here we are with another episode of Existential Ambiguity. This is the 15th episode.
Already?
Yeah. Oh, I'm Buddha Vangsa.
And I'm Dhamma Vangsa.
And we are the Vangsa brothers.
And we're just using I as words here.
Convenience, Convenience is the reason why people do so many things.
Well, we would have to make up a whole new language and they would have to learn it, so it's horribly inconvenient.
We would have to talk about a thought has arisen in this aggregate or something like that.
Terribly, feeling arises over here.
Yes, terribly awkward and inconvenient.
Huh.
So we're just going to use the common I in mind, even though we really don't believe in it. This is the second part of chapter 5. Of Wetthamuni's book, Buddha's Teaching and the Ambiguity of Existence, on the 5 clinging aggregates. So just to review very briefly, the 5 aggregates are called khandha, and they are matter or form, rupa, feeling, vedana, perception, sanya, determinations, sankhara, sometimes called fabrications, and consciousness, or vijnana. Now, in the case of the putujana, an ordinary, uninstructed hoi polloi,
run-of-the-mill person,
run-of-the-mill, standard variety, right out of the box, off the shelf, normal.
From redneck to hippie to yuppie.
That's right. And even some so-called Buddhists that we know.
And intellectuals?
Oh, very much intellectuals and academics and people like that.
They're all putujanas.
Why? Because they're not properly instructed in the Buddha's teaching.
Yes.
And what that means at the very minimum is to have what we call the eye of the Dhamma, which means a complete and accurate model of the Buddha's entire teaching. The ability to think through that teaching from one end to the other, perfectly, logically, without resorting to any mystical conveniences or shortcuts.
And practicing them in your experience.
Well, that's nice. If you can also practice them, that's very wonderful. But some things are harder to practice than others.
But if you don't try to practice it, then you're still a putujana.
Yes. At least you should be trying to attain nibbana. You should have the view of nibbana as the goal of life. And then you're no longer a putujana, you're a seika, a student, a learner. We're still at the beginning of our explanation of the eye of the teaching. We already covered attention or mindfulness, sati sampajanya, in the 3rd chapter. And in the 4th chapter, we covered the root structure of the putujana's consciousness, how the putujana generates mind and I from the immediate experience. And now we're talking about what is the putujana clinging to. How clinging develops is described in the root structure. But now what is he clinging to? And the answer, of course, is the 5 aggregates. So they become the 5 clinging aggregates. Right now we're going to go through each of the individual aggregates, beginning with consciousness. Wetthamuni writes, it would be best to begin with the consciousness aggregate, vijnana. Consciousness deserves first place because any experience means being conscious of the other 4 aggregates. I am conscious of matter, my body, an external object, or both. I am conscious of feeling. I am conscious of perception, and I am conscious of determinations. However, what is meant by being conscious of something? When I say I am conscious of something, it means that the thing of which I am conscious is present in me. Me includes my world, the things that I am in relation with.
Shows up in my space.
Yes. A sight, a sound, a smell, a taste, a touch, or a mental image is present. Present simply means here in now. Let's look it up. Present. Of a person. In a particular place. Of a thing. Existing or occurring in a place or thing. 2. Existing or occurring now. Now being considered or discussed. As in the present subject.
Present moment.
Now, that's a different usage. That's the use as a noun. The period of time now occurring. So actually, we're talking about its use as an adjective, saying that this thing is present. The word present modifies the word thing.
It is here and now for me.
It is here and now for me. Existing or occurring now. Now being considered or discussed. Or most fundamentally, in a particular place. And this brings up a very important and fundamental subject, that consciousness always includes dimensionality, a space, and a point of view. One can take any different point of view on a certain space, and that becomes one's presence. And the things that show up in that presence are that which one is conscious of. These are, it might seem like we're really getting down into the details, and we have to do that so that we know what we're talking about. When we say consciousness, what do we mean by it? There are any number of metaphysical, mystical explanations of consciousness. Okay.
But here it means present for me.
Yes. And that's all it means. And that's all it needs to mean. And it doesn't need to imply anything beyond that.
It doesn't need to have a transcendental object. Or
no,
like
it doesn't need to have a transcendental meaning either.
No.
It can just mean the thing is here. And I'm here.
We're not getting into transcendental because that's metaphysical.
This came up last night when I was thinking about the overall plan of our work and how we are trying to present the Buddha's teaching in a non-mystical way. Okay, and what does that mean? The example is of a physician, a doctor. You go to a doctor with a chronic disease, and the doctor, first thing after he diagnoses it, is he's going to educate you. The doctor's going to sit down and have a little talk, and he's going to tell you about your condition, what it means, how it's likely to affect your future, and then go over the different treatment options and what you can expect from them. At that point, does he need to introduce any metaphysical subjects? Let's say you have a disease like Alzheimer's that's going to affect your consciousness. Does he start talking about God and the universe and the absolute and all this mystical stuff? No. He just says, hey, this is going to make you stupid. And you have to deal with that. Yeah. And the people around you are going to have to deal with that.
So, it doesn't tell you what to do once you get rid of the disease either.
That's another point, that the doctor is not going to tell you when you're discharged, when your disease is cured.
You're going to go sailing.
No, you're going to play golf. No, you're going to sit on the couch and watch TV. No, the doctor never says anything. He just says, congratulations, you're cured. Now you can go home and live however you want to live. The doctor doesn't anymore try to put any restrictions on you. He might, while you're under treatment, he might say, well, you can't eat this. You can't do that. You know, this activity and that thing you have to give up for the time being while you're being cured. But once you're cured, those prohibitions are lifted, and you can do anything you want. You're free. And the same is true of the Buddha's teaching. First of all, he doesn't introduce any information that is unnecessary for your treatment. He doesn't.
There are rules, but the rules are there because they help with the treatment.
That's right. They're not there on some metaphysical grounds. They're not there on some religious grounds or moral grounds or because God said so or because I say so. No, they're there because they will help you get well, period. And if they weren't needed,
he wouldn't talk about it.
No, he wouldn't even go there because you can see there are so many things Buddha was asked that he refused to answer.
Invalid question.
Right. Why? Well, one reason is that it doesn't help you gain enlightenment, doesn't help you cure your disease. There are other reasons, too, that are more structural and have to do with the nature of the disease. You know? Like if part of the treatment for your disease involves removing your leg, for example, the doctor is not going to talk about, skiing.
No.
It's not a valid question because you're not going to be able to. Forget it. Similarly, what we're talking about in the Buddha's teaching is the removal of a cancerous growth of the mind called the false ego, the false personality, the self, quote unquote, or the I and mine. That these things are disease that stop us from the full enjoyment of life. And to get rid of them, we have to observe certain conditions, certain prohibitions, and so on, do certain work, certain process. But once we do that, that's it.
We're going to let go of the raft once we're over the river.
Yeah, and we don't know what that looks like either.
No.
So we can't speculate about it.
We shouldn't speculate about it.
Because we're not there, okay? Once you get over to the other side of the river and the big guys with the swords aren't running after you anymore, then you can think about where you want to go, what you want to do. The immediate concern is to get on that raft and get across that river, get to safety. So the Buddha does not introduce all these extraneous things. As you pointed out yesterday, he says, what I'm teaching you is equivalent to the leaves in my hand compared to what I know, which is like the leaves in the whole forest. So this is a very simple idea. It really could be stated in one book. In fact, we're going to try to do it. We're going to try to write a book called The Eye of the Teaching, which is a user manual for the Buddha Dhamma, a user guide to Buddha Dhamma. As easy as possible, as simple and clear as possible.
But not easier.
Not simpler either.
No.
We're not going to reject any important aspects of the Buddha's teaching just to make it simple.
Like we include the root structure of the Patujana, unlike any other book about the Buddha I've ever read.
Why? Because it's necessary.
Yeah.
We all have that process going on within us. It's just like if I was writing a software manual, and let's say the software you're using depends on some other piece of software. Well, I would have to describe that in my book too. Even though, technically speaking, maybe it's not exactly what I'm writing about. But because it affects the subject I'm writing about, I have to include it. Okay, so
here is a part of the basic operating system.
Yes, I know it's really very germane to the subject, but even if it wasn't, well, for example, these aggregates. The aggregates are not, strictly speaking, a part of you, but they are because of the way we handle them, because we cling to them. If we didn't cling to them, Buddha wouldn't even need to mention them. But because we cling to these things, and clinging is the disease. Someone asked the Buddha one time, could you describe your teaching in one sentence? And he said, yes, nothing whatsoever should be clung to. Clinging is the essence of the disease, dukkha, mental suffering, and non-clinging is the cure. Well, that's a very simple, very direct way to state it. But as soon as we begin to go into it, it starts to get more and more complicated. Okay, clinging is the disease. Well, so then there's a clinger, and then there's something that he's clinging to. So we talked about the clinger and how he develops his clinging mentality. Now, what is he clinging to? If he wasn't clinging to it, it wouldn't be germane to the discussion. But he is. So we have to describe it. Germane simply means relevant to a subject under consideration. So right now we're considering consciousness. And what does consciousness mean? That the thing is present. That could be an unpleasant feeling. It could be a pleasant feeling. It could be a neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling. But whatever it is present to me. Therefore, I'm conscious of it. That means the thing is in my world.
Yes.
Okay, when we say the world, we really mean my world. Because everybody's world is different. Everybody's world is centered on themselves. Everybody's world consists of the things that they are conscious of. And those things are the other 4 aggregates.
Yeah, the world consists of the 5 aggregates. There's nothing more in the world.
That's right.
And to the Putujana, it's the 5 clinging aggregates. To the Arahant, it would be just 5 aggregates without clinging.
That's it. The Arahant is someone who is cleared of the disease of clinging. He is cured of the disease of making I and mine. Mine means clinging. I is the clinger. And the things that are clung to are these 5 aggregates. And those are consciousness, feelings, perceptions, determinations, and matter, or form, especially the body. Weti Muni goes on. It is quite clear in experience that consciousness without an object of which one is conscious, pure consciousness, quote unquote, is impossible and inconceivable. Further, the object of consciousness itself cannot be consciousness. That would be like trying to illuminate a light with another light. That is, we cannot have consciousness of consciousness, which would be equivalent to the presence of presence. Very good. We can have consciousness only of matter, feeling, perception, and determination. So everything that we experience through consciousness. And everything that we experience is one of the other 4 aggregates. Everything that we're conscious of. And so we cannot really speak or think of any object without relation with consciousness. If we're not conscious of it, how can we speak of it?
It doesn't show up
How
for us.
can we even think of it? It doesn't even exist in our world.
No.
So though we speak of consciousness and objects separately, they are inseparable in experience, in actual life.
Yeah, we're not talking about some objective reality here. We're talking about phenomenology.
Yes, and phenomenology means as we experience things. So there's no theoretical, objective, scientific world. We're not concerned about it, if there is.
No.
But actually there isn't any such thing. If the tree falls in the forest and we're not there to hear it, we have no way to determine that it happened. Even later, by examining the evidence, there's a tree trunk lying horizontal on the ground. That means a tree fell in the forest. Well, it may have fallen in somebody else's world, but it didn't fall in your world. No. By the time you became aware of it, conscious of it, it was already down. So in your world, the existence of a falling tree is hypothetical. And the same way, the existence of an objective reality that is the same for everyone is simply hypothetical. Let's get that really straight. A lot of the things we think we experience are actually hypotheses or inductive reasoning. I see such and such evidence, therefore I induce the other thing that I am ontologically committed to existing, like the tree in the forest. If I see a tree trunk laying on the ground in the forest, I say, well, that is the evidence that previously a tree fell in the forest. But I have no way to prove that. No. There is absolutely no way. Maybe the tree grew that way, you know? Well, we know that in general trees don't grow horizontally, but still, the point being,
seen it happen.
There is no such thing as one objective reality that is shared by all beings. All reality is subjective. All worlds, the only world there is, exists in your consciousness. There is no other world. And if you think there is, it is simply your inference, your inferential logic.
Experientially, there's no other world than your own.
No. Inference means a conclusion reached on the basis of evidence and reasoning. What kind of reasoning? Inductive reasoning. Serving as a sign or indication of something. Inductive reasoning,
Good old Wikipedia.
also known as induction, or informally, bottom-up logic, is a kind of reasoning that constructs or evaluates general propositions derived from specific examples. In other words, you reason from the specific to the general. And guess what? Most of the time, you're going to be wrong.
Like the scientists
Like
are
the
about
scientists.
most of things.
Yes, most things.
They get mechanical stuff correct. They can make some stuff. Some physical stuff, some chemical stuff they can mix together and get the desired result. But
Well, they can observe that.
but
If they
induce a Big
conclude,
Bang and stuff like that.
but yeah, if they conclude that because I can mix these chemicals together in my laboratory, and this is what happens, that it is also happening in some interstellar gas cloud, that's bogus.
Without electricity.
They have no, they have no way to actually confirm so many of their theories. What the scientists actually do is that they keep changing their assumptions until the equations work out. That's what they do. And then they go up on the stage at the big conference or they publish the paper in the big journal that says, see, x equals 3y squared. Very simple. Now we know this is the law of the universe. Well, maybe in your laboratory on that particular day, but in fact, every single run of any experiment gives a different result. And the results are averaged or statistically analyzed to determine the law, quote unquote.
You said any experiment?
Any experiment. Any experiment. I don't care what it is, even simple mechanics. If you sit there with a frequency counter and you measure the frequency of a vibrating crystal or a light ray or something like that, every reading you take is going to be different.
And then you just make an average.
That's right. That's what the scientists do. They make an average of many, many trials, and then they say, okay, this is the law, this is the equation.
I've heard even gravity is like going up and down in measurements from
Gravity,
year to year.
From year to year. From here to the other side of the wall, it's changing.
Yeah.
Huh?
Because it's influenced by so many factors that we don't necessarily know.
That's right. So all the so-called laws of science are actually simply statistical averages. And what they do is they conveniently erase the noise, quote unquote. The noise, right? As if it's meaningless. Simply due to chance. They explain it away like that. Yet, they cannot controvert the fact, the physical, experiential fact, that every measurement they take of the so-called identical experiment is different.
You don't hear about that in the paper.
No, but if you sit in any laboratory and you make any experiment and you measure it with a sufficiently sensitive instrument, you'll find that it's true.
The so-called experts don't tell this to the public.
No, because they don't want the public to know. They want the public to think that they're such geniuses that they can figure out the laws of the universe. And you see, originally this came from religion, because the scientists were originally employed by the religious authorities to prove the existence of God, who is a rational, intelligent being who has created all this stuff, yes, with all of these eternal laws. Because the religion was in support of the government, and the government wanted an example of eternal laws so that they could pass a bunch of eternal laws that are based on eternal truth, you see, of morality according to them, according to their standards.
So that they can control the world eternally.
There you go.
Yeah.
Now you understand. But then guess what happened? Scientists got a big head. And they said, wait a minute. Some of these things we're discovering aren't in the Bible.
Oh my God, this stuff is impermanent.
Or they contradict what's in the Bible. Yeah. The case of Galileo was kind of a watershed that disclosed that the emperor had no clothes, or that the Pope had no clothes, which in those days was often the truth. Factually. And that the whole institution was actually corrupt.
Huh.
And since then, since the so-called Enlightenment, the business of science has been to disprove all the tenets of religion. Very strange, huh?
Yeah.
Something that was originally born of the religious organizations, then turned against it and became their staunch enemies. So I think it's really interesting that something similar like that is going on with government now. That these whistleblowers are coming out and announcing, remember that thing that the president promised, 6 years ago? Well, guess what? He did just the opposite. And this is typical because people in power, once they get too much power concentrated in their hands, inevitably abuse it for their own personal gain.
Everyone with power is Machiavellian asshole.
We're only human, Ronnie. We're not meant to have that much power. We don't have the strength of will or the strength of character to handle it properly. We're just human. So really the answer is to limit the amount of power that any one human being can get. And in the beginning, the framers of the Constitution of the United States did a pretty good job of dividing up the power and the checks and balances among the different branches of government to keep them in check.
Decentralized power.
Yes, but now gradually these slick lawyers, like Slick Willie, for example, and now we have Slick Obi. They have gradually changed the interpretation of the law to allow something that was actually prohibited by the framers of the Constitution of the United States. But now we're getting into a whole different subject. The thing is, this consciousness is different from the thing that it's conscious of.
It's like a reflection.
Yes. And in between them, there is a relation. The person who is conscious and the thing of which they're conscious are two things, and then the third thing is the relation between them. This is something that people often miss.
Yeah.
Of course, the fundamental relation is that they are conscious of that thing. But there are many more relations as well, like how do they become conscious of that thing? What meaning are they assigning to that consciousness?
Are they merely observing it, or are they adding something to it?
Right, and in most cases they're adding, and in most cases of adding, they're adding by inductive reasoning. And so their conclusions, although maybe they're generally correct, are not absolutely correct. There's always going to be exceptions. And this exceptionalism turns out to be a boondoggle, because pretty soon a boondoggle a boondoggle is a swamp where when you enter into it, you can't get out. Okay? That's the original meaning of the word. Comes from Creole, southern U.S. Dialect of English. The government especially is very good at creating boondoggles. When they get themselves into, they can't get themselves out because they make a law. And then the exceptions to that law are so numerous that they become bigger than the law itself. Look at income tax, for example. Income tax could be a very simple thing. Any money you make, you give 20% to the government, or 10%, or whatever the number is, okay? In the ancient Vedic days, it was 25%.
Oh.
Yeah. So anyway, according to the Bible, it should be 10% that you give to the church. But that's too simple for the politicians. They started making all these exceptions for their friends, see? And pretty soon, the tax law occupies a good-sized library, and nobody really understands it. It's too vast. So there are all these specialties, corporate tax law, non-profit corporate tax law, non-profit government-related tax law.
CFR tax law.
Yeah, right. They don't pay any taxes. So this is what's going on, that people start assigning meaning to consciousness that isn't there.
Or back to the scientist that's paid heavily to get some specific result.
Like all those studies of smoking back in the 1950s that concluded that smoking is harmless, just like all the studies of Wi-Fi and other radio...
almost healthy.
Cell phone radiation and stuff like that, that is paid for by the phone companies. Somehow or other comes to the conclusion that it's...
pharmaceutical industry.
Oh boy, that's another boondoggle. So...
GMO foods.
Oh boy, they're endless. Endless. Because all of the things that human beings invent always have unforeseen consequences. Everything that we think is good is only good in a very limited way. Only good for certain people.
And we always evaluate how is it good for me.
Right.
So we don't think about how is it good for all those other guys.
Well, most of the time it's not.
Let's build a nuclear facility over here.
Oh yeah, that'll be good.
For us.
Yeah. These things are present to the person who is conscious of them. They may or may not be present to other people. One of the wrong assumptions that people make all the time is that just because they look at something in a certain way, that everybody has to look at it that way.
I remember from watching some of the courses of Werner Erhard.
Yeah.
That someone was made to stand up and talk about stuff, and he had this very fixed mindset about something, about everyone thinks like this. And then,
everybody.
And then he asked other people in the crowd, and of course, most of them didn't think like that.
Yeah. That's a very simple, easy example. You just stop 5 people on the street and ask them about something that you feel very strongly about, and you'll find that most of them disagree with you. It never fails.
If you do that experiment, don't get emotionally attached to results.
Well, yeah, you're probably going to get into a fight with one of them at least. So it's impossible to speak of pure consciousness. We can't speak of consciousness in an abstract way. We can only speak of consciousness of something.
We don't treat consciousness as a transcendental object.
No. Consciousness is not an absolute. Consciousness is always relative.
Always reflects some object.
Yes. It's consciousness that belongs to a particular individual, and it's directed towards a particular object. There's no such thing as objectless consciousness, and there's no such thing as consciousness that does not belong to a person, somebody.
In experiential approach. So
well, that's what we're talking about.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, we're not talking about any kind of
what might
metaphysical...
be outside
we're not
creating a metaphysical...
We're trying to destroy or deconstruct metaphysics, because metaphysics is another inductive type of reasoning that says, just because I think this is a good idea, now I'm going to try to live my life by it, and I'm going to try to impose it on others. And we see millions of people have been killed because of metaphysics. Because the Catholic Church adopted Aristotelian logic in the 10th century because they were always getting smashed by the Greeks in debate. Because they had no logic, no theory of knowledge, no ontology, nothing. And then the consequences of that led directly to Inquisitions and like that. Because either you're a saint or a sinner. Either you are saved or you're not. Either you are a believer or a heretic. And there's no in between.
Either you're with us or against us.
That's right. It's black and white. Because that's Aristotelian logic. Aristotelian logic only has 2 truth values. Right and wrong. Yes and no. It's binary.
Pretty stupid.
Well, it's very elementary logic, okay?
It works for some things, but...
Real logic, like Vedic logic, has an infinite number of truth values.
Which is ontological truth.
That's ontologically true.
And that's what we're using now in all our latest technology, like... Like quantum computing, for example. Like Facebook and Google and stuff like that.
Yeah, they all use ontological principles in their software.
It's not on or off, it's all different kinds of values.
Well, it's implemented in digital, but it contains, for example, You could have a truth, a value for truth that is like an 8-bit value. That would be 256 possible values for truthfulness. You see? That would be more practical than just having 1 and 0, yes and no. Right? In life, it works out to asking, instead of asking, is this right or wrong? It's asking, how much is this right and wrong?
For whom?
For whom and why? On account of what motivation and so on like that. See, abstractly, it makes sense that something is either true or false, either right or wrong. But in life, we find that it's almost never so.
If we're going to live in peace on this planet, it just for or against won't cut it, because there are so many values that are so extreme.
I don't know if we're going to get much farther than this, because guess what? We're almost out of time. We're out of town too. We've been blowing up rocks all morning. Literally. We had the guy come in today with the drill and the dynamite excavating our Kutir site, and been literally blowing up rocks. So I guess we'll blow up a few more here in the podcast and try to address these issues of consciousness, because really consciousness is all we've got. People try to maintain external objects as theirs, but really
they're not there anymore.
Yeah, they come and go with time. But consciousness is there all the time. Even during deep sleep, we are conscious to a certain degree, and that's why we can be woken up by a noise or a touch or something. So even in deep sleep, consciousness is there, although it may be very low. That means consciousness is the primary thing that we're in touch with, the primary thing that is present for us in our world. So we should understand it. And of course, here we go again. In Western education, all concepts of consciousness are relegated to graduate school level. Unless you happen to be a philosophy major or something like that. Nobody is going to teach you about consciousness. You have to go and dig it up yourself.
Not even the psychologist is going to teach you about consciousness.
No, they avoid the whole issue.
They call it the science of the soul.
Psychology. Psyche in Greek means the soul. And ology, of course, means a science. But they don't talk about it. They don't talk about what their profession is about.
They don't talk about the soul, they don't talk about consciousness.
Because, guess what? They don't have the language, they don't have the concepts. All of that has been relegated to advanced philosophy.
And their knowledge is based on empirical, so-called objective knowledge.
It's based on the kickbacks that they get from the drug companies for prescribing all these antipsychotics.
And before that, it was the kickbacks from the religious authorities or the government.
Yeah, for committing certain people who are inconvenient. I know this because I grew up in the middle of one of these scenes. My mother was demonized and ultimately committed to a state mental institution by her own family and minister and doctor, simply because she was an embarrassment to the family. She went out and had a child out of marriage.
And she was never diagnosed?
No, she lived in the state mental institution system of New Jersey for over 25 years and was never diagnosed with any disease, any mental condition. That's because she wasn't crazy.
But she sure was inconvenient.
She was right in the way. She was the eldest child of my grandmother and would have stood to inherit her property. And nobody wanted her to inherit it because they didn't like her. She was having way too much fun. So they got rid of her by declaring her insane. And they built up their story over years and years and years and put pressure on her that, of course, got her starting to manifest some symptoms.
Yeah.
And then they use those symptoms to get a commitment order and like that. So this is going on simply because somebody doesn't like the contents of another person's consciousness, right?
That's one part of it, and the other part, she's got something that should be mine.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Money is, well, it may not be the root of all evil, but it certainly is doing a lot of the funding.
Yeah, main motivator.
So this is all due to lack of knowledge of consciousness, lack of a technology of dealing with consciousness.
Understanding what makes you happy and what makes you suffer.
Yeah. Yeah, because if those people had really understood the situation, they would have just sat down and like worked things out. They would have been content to let things take their natural course. But no. And because of this, they committed an evil act, a terribly evil act that no doubt they are now suffering for. Yeah. This is not just armchair philosophy. This is not just, harmless or abstract speculation. This is something that everybody needs to know, which has been deliberately buried in the upper reaches of the educational system and is not made available to ordinary people.
And it's definitely graspable for all kinds of people if they have the desire and they spend the time to learn it.
Well, is your nose graspable? Everybody has a nose. If I say nose, everybody knows what I'm talking about. But if I say consciousness, everybody's got a consciousness. But they have all these weird ideas about it. Like it's metaphysical.
They always fill it up with all this stuff, so they can't really...
They don't ever just look at consciousness itself and how it's working. So we're going to do that in the process of going through this chapter of Mr. Wetamuni's book. We're going to bring out a lot of information that we have gathered over the years about consciousness. And it's going to be very practical, very down to earth. So we're looking forward to having you keep up with our podcast. You can go to the podcast page on our blog. And all the episodes are listed there.
And we're only human too, so we might make the occasional mistake sometimes. I'm not saying we did one now. So if you disagree with something, we would like to hear about that also.
Oh boy, that's like giving a blank ticket to the Christians to just
But it should be based in your own experience.
Yes, right. In other words, we don't honor arguments that are based on some doctrine.
Yeah.
It has to be experiential.
We're not gonna believe your priest or your guru.
Yeah. Just like we asked on that group today. What is the difference between the Buddhist doctrine of cessation without remainder and complete annihilation? What's the difference? Experientially, what is the difference? Nobody can answer.
And no one would admit that they couldn't answer either.
It's not like we enjoy baiting people or embarrassing them.
No, we really want to know these things.
That's right. We really do. Because it's personally important to us. These are the kind of questions we're going to be asking and hopefully answering in the course of this series. It's going to go deep. It's not always going to be easy. In fact, there are certain topics that are very difficult. And
keeping the self around, that's even more difficult.
Yeah, but again, we're getting into a realm that is normally considered like graduate or postgraduate level, right? Even though it's really quite graspable by anybody with a little intelligence.
And a dictionary.
Yeah, who's willing to think about it and observe themselves.
Yeah.
So we hope we made you think. We hope we got you to take a look at a few things in yourself.
Reflect, but also you have to reflect, yes.
And that's the real meaning of existential ambiguity.